What if the person you trusted most threw you away when you needed them the most? What if the world laughed at you, calling you broke, when deep down you held a power no one could imagine? Stay with me, because this story might feel like it's yours too. The night had started like any other in Manhattan's glittering skyline. But the moment the black limousine pulled up to the private entrance of the most expensive penthouse in the city, the world tilted. The glass doors slid open, and whispers spread like wildfire among the staff lined in the marble lobby. The woman stepping out was not a glamorous celebrity, not a politician's daughter, not the heiress of some royal dynasty, at least not to those who had once known her. To them, she was a discarded wife, the woman her ex-husband had mocked as penniless, abandoned, and forgotten. Her name was Elena Carter, and she was heavily pregnant, her hand resting protectively over her rounded belly as she took a steady breath. The soft fabric of her ivory dress clung to her frame, not expensive by appearance, but worn with dignity, every stitch radiating quiet strength. Her eyes, however, told the real story. They were not the eyes of a defeated woman. They burned with a determination so fierce that even the marble pillars seemed to bow in her presence. The doormen froze. They knew exactly whose penthouse this was. A fortress in the sky worth over $50 million, perched like a crown at the very top of Park Avenue. For years, only one man had claimed it, Victor Hayes, her ex-husband. A man who had built his reputation as a ruthless investor, a man whose arrogance filled every room he entered, and the very same man who had once laughed in her face and told her she was a broke nobody who would never survive without him. Yet here she was, arriving not as a guest, not as a beggar, but as the owner. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she crossed the lobby, and the sound was deafening in the silence. It wasn't just her presence that stunned them. It was the realization that everything they thought they knew about this woman was about to unravel. 6 months earlier, Victor had thrown her out with nothing but a suitcase and the clothes on her back. She had been pregnant then too, though he had sneered at the news, claiming he had no time for a child and no patience for a wife who couldn't carry her own weight. To him, Elena had been weak, disposable, a liability in a life dedicated to power and appearances. He paraded his mistress through high society galas, showering her with jewels, while Elena found herself wandering the city streets, humiliated and alone. And yet, what Victor never realized, what he never even bothered to uncover, was that Elena Carter had a truth far more powerful than his money or his arrogance. She was not broke. She was not helpless. She was, in fact, the sole heir to one of the largest private fortunes in the country, a hidden empire her late father had carefully shielded from public eyes. While Victor was busy flaunting his shallow victories, Elena had inherited everything: the companies, the properties, the global investments. Billions. Now, the truth was about to come crashing down on him. As the elevator doors slid open, Elena stepped inside, her reflection caught in the golden panels. For a brief moment, her hand trembled against her belly, and she whispered softly, "We're almost there, my little one. Tonight, the world will know." Above her, the penthouse gleamed, a palace in the sky filled with rare art, crystal chandeliers and silk-covered walls. Victor was inside, hosting yet another of his extravagant parties, laughing too loudly, basking in the admiration of investors and socialites who believed his every word. He had no idea what awaited him. No idea that the woman he had discarded as useless was about to walk back into his life in the most dramatic way possible. Down below, in the lobby, one of the staff exchanged a nervous glance with another. "Isn't that his ex-wife?" a young maid whispered. The older doorman swallowed hard. "It is, but she looks different, stronger." Different was an understatement. Elena wasn't the timid, quiet woman who had once shrunk beneath Victor's voice. She had spent the last months in silence, planning, waiting for the moment to strike. Every insult, every betrayal, every night she cried alone in a tiny rented apartment while carrying his child, had only hardened her resolve. She was not here to beg. She was not here to reconcile. She was here to reclaim her dignity, to show the world and Victor that she was not broken. And when the elevator chimed at the top floor and the golden doors opened into the breathtaking expanse of the $50 million penthouse, the party inside came to a stunned halt. Music faltered. Glasses froze mid-air. Dozens of eyes turned as one, following the sound of her footsteps across the marble floor. Elena Carter, the ex-wife everyone had whispered about, the woman Victor had mocked and discarded, was here, pregnant, radiant, and more powerful than any of them could have imagined. Victor's laughter died in his throat when he saw her. His mistress clutched his arm tighter, her painted smile faltering. The investors, the so-called friends who had once turned their backs on Elena, gasped and exchanged hushed words. No one had expected her to return, and certainly not like this. The silence was unbearable. Then Elena lifted her chin, her voice calm, measured, but sharp enough to slice through the air. "Surprised to see me, Victor?" The man who had once mocked her as broke suddenly found himself trembling in his own fortress, because deep down he knew her presence here meant something he couldn't yet comprehend, and the truth was about to destroy him. Because Elena Carter wasn't just here to visit. She owned the Penthouse, and tonight she was going to prove it. Before Elena Carter stepped into that penthouse like a storm ready to shatter everything, she had once been the kind of woman people barely noticed. To the outside world, she was ordinary. Too ordinary for the glamorous Victor Hayes. Friends whispered that she was lucky to have caught his attention at all, that she should cling to him for dear life. That without him, she'd be nothing. Those words had cut her deeper than she ever admitted, and for a while, she almost believed them. Elena had grown up far from the flashing lights of Manhattan. She was born in a quiet Connecticut town, raised by her mother after her father passed when she was very young. What most people never knew was that her father had been no ordinary man. He was a visionary, the quiet architect of an empire built across finance, shipping, and technology. But he kept his fortune carefully hidden, tucked behind layers of trusts and private holdings. His dream had always been to give Elena a normal life, free from the suffocating expectations that come with wealth. So Elena lived like any other girl in her neighborhood. She rode her bike down tree-lined streets, worked part-time at the local library during high school, and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Her mother, gentle but firm, instilled in her a belief that kindness mattered more than appearances, that dignity was a treasure no one could steal. For a time, Elena believed her life would remain simple, perhaps even small. She had no hunger for fame, no desire for glittering parties. She just wanted love, stability, and a family. Then came Victor. She met him in her mid-20s at a charity fundraiser. Victor Hayes was magnetic, his voice deep, his smile sharp, his ambition like fire. He spotted Elena across the room and made his way to her as if she were the only person who mattered. At first it felt like a fairy tale. Victor seemed fascinated by her quiet grace, her soft laughter, the way she didn't fawn over him like everyone else. To Elena, who had grown up cautious of people chasing her hidden fortune, Victor felt refreshingly genuine. She never told him about her inheritance, never revealed the trust funds or the sprawling empire that one day would be hers. Instead, she let him believe she was just a modest woman from Connecticut with a hopeful heart. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony. Elena thought she had found her forever. She cooked his meals, supported his dreams, listened to his plans, and built her life around him. When she discovered she was pregnant, her heart soared. She imagined a home filled with laughter, the pitter-patter of tiny feet, bedtime stories whispered in the dark. She imagined Victor holding her hand in the delivery room, weeping with joy as they welcomed their child. But dreams can turn into nightmares. It started with subtle changes. Victor grew distant, impatient, cruel in ways that stung more than any slap could. He mocked her simple dresses, sneered at her reluctance to spend money, accused her of holding him back. When she told him about the baby, expecting him to be overjoyed, he rolled his eyes. "You think this is the right time? You don't even bring anything to the table, Elena. I'm carrying all the weight here." His words pierced her like daggers. She tried to fix things. She smiled through tears, cooked his favorite meals, reassured him she would find ways to help. She even considered telling him the truth about her inheritance, desperate to save their marriage. But something inside her stopped her. Deep down, she knew Victor didn't love her. He loved control. He loved being worshipped. And if he discovered her fortune, he would devour it until there was nothing left. The breaking point came on a rainy night. Elena was 6 months pregnant, exhausted and fragile. Victor had been drinking, his mistress's perfume clinging to his suit. When she confronted him, trembling but determined, he laughed. "Don't fool yourself, Elena. You're nothing without me. Broke, weak, pathetic. No man would ever want you." Then, with a sneer, he ordered her out. So there she was, pregnant, heartbroken, and alone on the wet streets of New York. She had no one to call, no home to return to, no arms to comfort her. She spent that night in a shabby motel, clutching her belly, whispering apologies to the child growing inside her. But something shifted in Elena that night. The tears dried. The fear hardened into steel. She remembered her father's words spoken long ago. "One day, the world will try to tell you what you're worth. Don't listen. You carry more power than they can imagine." Victor might have thrown her away, but he had no idea whom he had underestimated. The following weeks were a blur of quiet transformation. Elena met with lawyers who had managed her father's estate. For years, she had ignored their calls, content to let her fortune sit untouched. But now, with her dignity stripped and her child's future at stake, she embraced the truth. She wasn't broke. She wasn't powerless. She was one of the wealthiest women in the country. As contracts were signed and accounts unlocked, the scale of her inheritance became clear. Private islands, stakes in global corporations, a chain of luxury hotels, and yes, real estate across Manhattan, including one towering gem, the $50 million penthouse at Park Avenue. The very same penthouse Victor had once bragged about as if it were his own. In reality, it had belonged to Elena all along, transferred quietly into her trust before their marriage. The irony was delicious. Elena didn't rush. She didn't storm back into his world right away. Instead, she waited, watching from a distance as Victor flaunted his mistress, mocking Elena to anyone who would listen. He told his friends she was broke, that she would come crawling back, begging for his help. He believed his lies so deeply that he never saw the truth creeping closer. And when Elena finally stepped out of the shadows, carrying not just her unborn child but the weight of her legacy, she knew the time had come. She would not return as the woman he discarded. She would return as the billionaire he could never break. And her entrance into that penthouse would be the moment the entire city realized the truth. The weak wife was gone. In her place stood a woman who would make him regret every cruel word, every betrayal, every night he thought she was beneath him. And tonight, Victor Hayes would finally understand who Elena Carter really was. The penthouse at the crown of Park Avenue was not simply a home. It was a kingdom, a shimmering fortress suspended above the city, where glass walls framed the skyline like priceless artwork. Every inch had been designed to intimidate and impress. Imported marble stretched across the floors, gleaming so perfectly polished that it reflected the chandeliers dripping from 20-foot ceilings. Rare sculptures from Europe stood like silent guardians in corners, while paintings worth millions hung in gilded frames. The air itself smelled of money, leather, mahogany, and the faint trace of imported cigars. For years, Victor Hayes had paraded this penthouse as proof of his triumph. Guests whispered that no man in New York had climbed higher, both figuratively and literally. The parties he threw here were legendary. Rivers of champagne, orchestras tucked into alcoves, investors and celebrities mingling under the same glittering roof. To Victor, it was the ultimate stage, a place where he could perform his role as master of the universe. What none of them knew, what not even Victor himself fully realized, was that the penthouse was never his. It had always belonged to Elena Carter. It had been secured by her father years ago, wrapped in trusts so intricate that Victor's lawyers had never uncovered the truth. To him, it was his throne. To Elena, it was her inheritance, her sanctuary reclaimed. The night she returned, the penthouse was alive with another of Victor's soirees. The golden ballroom, with its panoramic windows overlooking the twinkling lights of Manhattan, overflowed with men in tuxedos and women in gowns that shimmered like liquid stars. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter rose in waves. A quartet played softly near the balcony, their music weaving through the air like silk. Waiters in white gloves floated silently between clusters of guests, balancing trays of canapés that cost more than most people's rent. At the center of it all stood Victor Hayes, tall and smug, his arm wrapped around his latest conquest, a raven-haired beauty in a red sequined gown. Her laugh was shrill, echoing too loudly in the marble chamber, but Victor basked in it, proud to showcase her like a new trophy. He lifted his glass, entertaining a circle of investors with tales of his brilliance, his voice booming across the room. "Elena?" someone whispered near the entrance, their champagne flute trembling slightly. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. For in that moment, Elena Carter stepped inside. The contrast was breathtaking. Where the other women dripped in diamonds and feathers, Elena appeared in a simple ivory dress, her silhouette softened by her pregnancy. Yet the quiet elegance of her presence eclipsed every jewel in the room. Her hair fell in dark waves around her shoulders, her eyes steady, her chin lifted with dignity. She didn't need sequins or rubies. She carried something far rarer, undeniable power. The room shifted. Men who had once dismissed her as invisible suddenly straightened. Women whispered, some with pity, others with envy. Even the music seemed to falter as the quartet's bows trembled across strings. Victor froze. The mistress on his arm tightened her grip, but it was too late. His smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing with disbelief. The wife he had mocked as penniless, the woman he had sworn would never survive without him, was here, in his penthouse, at his party, in front of everyone. But it wasn't only her presence that unsettled him. It was the way she carried herself, as though she owned the place, because she did. Elena's heels clicked softly across the marble as she advanced, each step echoing in the stunned silence. Her hand rested on her belly, protective yet resolute, as though the child within lent her strength. She stopped just short of Victor's circle, her gaze sweeping the room, taking in the sea of shocked faces. For Elena, the setting was more than a stage. It was a battlefield. Every gilded surface, every glittering chandelier, every balcony overlooking the city was part of her inheritance, part of the empire her father had left for her to protect. And tonight, in front of all Victor's friends, allies, and admirers, she was going to reclaim it. "Surprised to see me, Victor?" Her voice was calm, unshaken, carrying effortlessly across the room. Murmurs erupted. Some guests gasped. Others leaned in, eager for scandal. The mistress flushed scarlet, her painted smile trembling. Victor tried to recover, forcing a laugh, but the crack in his armor was visible. "Elena," he said, his voice strained, "what are you doing here? This isn't your place." Elena's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Isn't it?" A ripple of unease coursed through the room. Investors exchanged wary glances. They had come to Victor's penthouse, Victor's party, Victor's kingdom. But the confidence in Elena's eyes made them question everything. Whispers swelled. Some recalled rumors they had heard but dismissed. Could it be true? Could she, the discarded wife, actually hold the real power? The city beyond glittered like a witness, the skyline shimmering with possibility. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, every guest aware they were witnessing a reckoning. This was the setting Elena had chosen with precision. Not a courtroom, not a lawyer's office, not a private confrontation. No, she had chosen Victor's throne, his penthouse in the sky, because she knew it was the one place where humiliation would cut deepest. He had used these walls to mock her, to parade his mistress, to pretend he was untouchable. Tonight, these walls would expose him. As she turned slightly, her gaze lingered on the paintings, the marble, the chandeliers. She thought of her father, of his quiet warning that wealth can be both a shield and a weapon. She had chosen to wield it tonight. Guests leaned closer, their curiosity sharpened into hunger. They could feel the storm brewing, sense that this quiet woman was about to dismantle the illusion Victor had built. The setting was perfect. A glittering penthouse, a room full of witnesses, and a man too arrogant to realize the empire he flaunted had never truly been his. And as Elena prepared to speak again, every soul in the room held their breath, waiting for the first blow of her revenge. Victor Hayes had built his image carefully, like an artist sculpting marble. To the public, he was a titan of finance, a man who clawed his way from nothing to the penthouse in the clouds. Reporters called him ruthless but brilliant, the kind of man who could turn failing companies into gold with a single decision. Magazines photographed him with tailored suits, expensive watches, and a smile so polished it could blind. To his investors, he was charming, confident, unstoppable. But beneath the gloss, Victor was something else entirely. He was greedy, insecure, and hungry for validation in a way that never ceased. No matter how much he acquired, it was never enough. He needed not just money, but worship. He needed the world to look at him and believe he was invincible. And the cruelest truth was that he had used Elena as a stepping stone in that climb. When they first met, he had played the part of the doting husband perfectly. Flowers, dinners, whispered promises. But even then, Victor saw Elena as an accessory, not a partner. He mistook her kindness for weakness, her quiet strength for submission. He believed she would never stand up to him, never walk away, never reveal the truth of who she was. And so he grew careless. The mistress on his arm now, a young woman named Serena Vale, was the latest in a long line of indulgences. She was 26, ambitious, and dangerously naive. To her, Victor was a ticket into the glittering world she had always dreamed of. She adored the expensive jewelry he draped on her, the designer gowns he paid for, the seats at galas where cameras flashed. She was willing to ignore his temper, his arrogance, his controlling ways, because she thought she was winning. But Serena didn't realize she was merely a reflection of Victor's ego. He flaunted her because she made him feel young, powerful, desired. He enjoyed parading her in front of friends and enemies alike, a cruel reminder that he had discarded his wife for someone more glamorous, more worthy of his wealth. Now, as Elena stood across the room, Serena's painted smile trembled. She could sense the shift, though she didn't understand it. She had heard Victor mock his ex-wife countless times. Broke, he'd sneered. Pathetic. Probably living in some dingy apartment now. Serena had believed him. But the woman in front of her tonight was not pathetic. She radiated a strength that made Serena suddenly feel small, like a cheap imitation of something real. Victor, however, was trapped in his own arrogance. He could feel the whispers buzzing around him, see the investors exchanging curious glances, but he forced his smirk back into place. He refused to believe Elena could touch him here, in his kingdom. He raised his glass, his voice booming louder than necessary. "Ladies and gentlemen, I see my ex-wife has decided to join us this evening." A ripple of awkward laughter swept the room, though it died quickly. "I'm sure she's here for sentimental reasons." The words dripped with mockery, but his bravado cracked when Elena didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled slightly, tilting her head as if studying him like a specimen under glass. Victor hated that smile. It reminded him of everything he had tried to bury. The nights Elena had warned him not to gamble away money, the times she had urged him to treat people with dignity. She had always been the quiet voice of conscience he didn't want to hear. And now that same quiet strength threatened to expose him. For all his wealth, Victor carried a secret weakness: fear. Fear of being exposed as ordinary, fear of being overshadowed, fear of losing the admiration he craved. He had built his empire on lies, on shady deals, manipulated numbers, and alliances forged in shadows. He had kept mistresses to feel powerful, cheated investors when he thought no one would notice, and silenced critics with money. But deep down, he knew the truth. Without appearances, without the illusion of control, he was nothing. Serena, meanwhile, tightened her grip on his arm. She whispered, "Victor, why is she here? She looks different." "She's nothing," he snapped under his breath, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Ignore her." But Serena couldn't ignore her. Neither could anyone else. Elena had chosen her entrance well, and now Victor's carefully curated image teetered on the edge of collapse. One of the investors, a silver-haired man named Charles Beaumont, cleared his throat. "Victor, he didn't tell us Elena was in town. We thought she had disappeared." Victor forced a laugh, but his face stiffened. "She's irrelevant. She has nothing to do with this world anymore." Elena's gaze flicked toward Charles, then back to Victor. "Funny," she said softly, "because this world has everything to do with me." The room buzzed louder now. Guests leaned closer, their curiosity ignited. Serena's eyes widened. Victor's hand tightened around his glass until it trembled. This was the true villain, stripped bare. Not a charming mogul, not a brilliant leader, but a man unraveling under the weight of his lies. He was a coward dressed in silk, a tyrant who believed cruelty was strength. And Elena had come not just to confront him, but to reveal him to the world. The chandeliers glittered above as if mocking him, the penthouse walls closing in on the empire he thought he controlled. Victor Hayes, the man who had once sneered that Elena was broke, was about to face a truth more devastating than bankruptcy. Because his greatest enemy was not another businessman, not a rival company, but the very woman he had thrown away. The penthouse was heavy with tension, its glittering chandeliers now seeming less like jewels and more like spotlights trained on the drama unfolding. Dozens of eyes followed Elena Carter as she stood tall, her ivory dress glowing against the sea of sequins and tuxedos. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, yet her posture radiated unshakable composure. Victor Hayes, desperate to salvage his crumbling facade, raised his glass again, his laughter too loud, too forced. "Ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled. This is just a dramatic entrance. Elena doesn't belong here anymore. She's nothing but my past." The words hung in the air like poison. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, others smirked, enjoying the spectacle. Serena, Victor's mistress, leaned closer to him, emboldened by his mockery. With a sly smile, she chimed in. "She looks like she wandered in from a charity line. What did you wear, Elena? The clearance rack." The laughter that followed was sharp, cruel, and it echoed in the marble room. Elena's heart clenched, not for herself, but for the child she carried, for the world he would one day inherit. She had known this moment would come. She had prepared for it. Still, hearing the sting of betrayal in public, the ridicule of people she had once entertained in her own home, tested her strength. She took a slow breath. Victor smirked, believing he had regained control. He wrapped an arm tighter around Serena, flaunting her like a glittering trophy. "See? This is what happens when you can't keep up. Some people just aren't built for this world." Elena thought she could play the part of a wife, but in the end, she couldn't afford it, literally. The insults struck and gasps broke out. The investors, the socialites, the journalists quietly snapping photos, everyone saw the venom dripping from Victor's tongue. For a moment, Elena lowered her gaze, her fingers brushing her rounded belly, as though drawing strength from within. Then she lifted her head, her eyes locking on Victor's. "Interesting," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm around her. "You speak of what I can't afford, Victor, in a home that was never yours." The room stilled. Even Serena blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Victor barked, his confidence wavering. Elena stepped forward, her heels clicking on the marble like a drumbeat of destiny. She turned slightly, addressing not just Victor but the entire room. "For years, I let you parade me as nothing. For years, I listened as you told the world I was broke, irrelevant, unworthy. And yet, here we stand, inside a penthouse purchased not with your brilliance, not with your money, but with my father's legacy. This home has always been mine. Every chandelier, every marble tile, every inch of glass in these walls belongs to me." A collective gasp swept the room. Guests turned to one another, whispering furiously. The quartet stopped playing entirely, their bows frozen mid-air. Investors who had backed Victor shifted uncomfortably, their faith cracking. Victor's face flushed crimson. "Lies," he shouted, slamming his glass onto a nearby table. "You think anyone here believes you? You're desperate, Elena. You'll say anything to humiliate me." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Elena's gaze was unwavering. "You already humiliated yourself the night you threw me out pregnant, left me to wander the streets while you celebrated with your mistress. You humiliated yourself every time you laughed at me, mocked me, told your friends I was nothing. But tonight, the truth is no longer hidden. Tonight, everyone sees you for what you are, a fraud propped up by arrogance." Serena's grip on his arm slackened. She had never heard that story. The guests leaned closer, scandal and shock filling their eyes. Cameras discreetly flashed as journalists realized they had struck gold. Victor tried to laugh again, but it came out hollow. "No one cares about your sob story. These people are here for success, for wealth, for winners. And that's me, not you." Elena's lips curved into a calm smile. "Then perhaps you should explain to them why your supposed empire is drowning in debt, or why half the properties you claim as your own are mortgaged to the brink. You see, Victor, I know more about your books than you think. You left enough trails behind, and it wasn't hard to follow them." Now the room erupted in whispers. Investors exchanged sharp glances, some pulling out phones to check emails, others stepping back as if Victor's downfall might be contagious. Serena's eyes widened in panic. "Victor, is that true?" she hissed, but he shoved her off, his facade cracking wide open. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped, but his voice shook. Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice so the room leaned in to catch every word. "The truth, Victor, is that you've been living in a palace of mirrors, and tonight those mirrors are shattering." Her words sliced through him, leaving him pale and trembling. The betrayal he had tried to stage, mocking her in front of everyone, parading his mistress like a victory, had backfired spectacularly. Instead, it was he who stood exposed, humiliated, his empire teetering on collapse under the weight of her revelations. The chandeliers above glittered like judgment. The marble walls echoed with whispers of scandal. And the city beyond the glass windows twinkled as if celebrating the moment. In the middle of it all, Elena stood tall, her hand on her belly, her eyes steady. She had endured his cruelty, his betrayal, his public humiliation. And now, in the very heart of his kingdom, she had turned the tables. And as Victor staggered under the weight of her words, the crowd knew. They had only witnessed the beginning of her reckoning. The penthouse had fallen into chaos. Investors whispered frantically, Serena pulled away in shock, and Victor barked orders no one obeyed. Yet for Elena, the noise blurred into a dull hum. Her heart pounded too loudly, her breath caught too shallow, and for the first time that night, doubt crept in. She had stood her ground, spoken her truth. But the weight of it all now pressed down like an avalanche. Her hand clutched her belly as her child kicked, as if sensing her turmoil. Strength had carried her into this confrontation, but strength was draining fast. "Elena!" A voice hissed, one of the maids she had once tipped kindly when Victor never bothered. The young woman reached out to steady her as Elena swayed slightly. "Are you all right?" Elena forced a smile, though her vision blurred at the edges. "I'm fine," she whispered, but she wasn't. The humiliation of laughter still echoed in her mind. The sting of Serena's cruel words, the memories of being tossed onto the streets, the months of loneliness, all of it came crashing back in waves. She had faced Victor with courage, but now she was drowning in the aftermath. Victor seized the moment. "Look at her," he sneered, pointing as though she were a spectacle at a carnival. "She can't even stand on her own 2 feet. This is the woman claiming power? This is the woman who thinks she owns this place? Don't be fooled. She's weak. She always has been." Some guests chuckled nervously, siding with the louder voice in the room. The sting was sharp. Elena's throat tightened, tears threatening. She wanted to scream, to collapse, to run from the suffocating marble walls closing in. She stumbled toward the balcony, desperate for air. The city stretched before her, glittering and alive, but her reflection in the glass doors showed a woman pale, weary, broken. She pressed her hand to the cool surface, whispering to herself, "Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm not strong enough." The memory of that rainy night returned, when she had been shoved out with nothing but a suitcase. The same despair threatened to consume her now. She thought of the motel room where she had cried alone, of the phone calls unanswered, of the friends who had turned their backs. She had been powerless then. Was she still powerless now? Behind her, Victor's voice boomed, regaining confidence. "You see, she can talk, but she can't deliver. She's nothing but a dramatic act. I built this life. Me, not her. She'll crawl back to whatever hole she came from." The laughter of his supporters echoed again, each note a dagger. Elena's hands trembled. For a terrifying second, she wondered if she had made a mistake stepping into this world at all. She closed her eyes. In the darkness, she heard her mother's voice, soft but firm. "Dignity, Elena. That's your treasure. Don't let anyone steal it." She heard her father's words. "You carry more power than they can imagine." Her baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if reminding her, "We are not weak. Not anymore." A sob escaped her lips, half despair, half release. She turned away from the glass, wiping her tears quickly before anyone could see. But the crowd had noticed. Some eyes held pity, others scorn. To them she looked like a woman unraveling. And in truth, she was. For a moment, she let herself collapse into a nearby chair, her body trembling with exhaustion. She hid her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. All the months of pretending she was fine, all the strength she had forced herself to carry, broke open. The humiliation was raw, the pain unbearable. Victor smirked, savoring the sight. "Pathetic," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Serena laughed, though it rang hollow now. Guests shook their heads, whispering, convinced the drama had ended with Elena's defeat. But in that collapse, something unexpected stirred. A hand rested gently on Elena's shoulder. She looked up to see Charles Beaumont, the silver-haired investor who had once doubted Victor's every deal. His eyes were kind, steady. "Don't let him win," he whispered. "You're stronger than this, and you're not alone." His words struck her like a lifeline. For months, she had been alone, carrying her child and her pain in silence. Now here was someone who saw her, not as broken, not as weak, but as resilient. Her tears slowed, her breath steadied, and somewhere deep within, a spark reignited. Victor, sensing the shift, barked louder. "Security, get her out of here. She has no place in my home." The words were his undoing, because in that moment, Elena lifted her head, her eyes blazing through tears. "Your home?" she whispered, her voice gaining strength. She stood, her legs steadier than before. "No, Victor, this was never your home." Gasps erupted. Investors leaned forward. Serena's smile vanished. Victor froze, the arrogance draining from his face as Elena straightened, dignity restored. The collapse was over. The storm inside her had cleared, leaving only resolve. She had broken down, yes. She had cried, trembled, doubted herself. But now, rising from that vulnerable moment, she carried something stronger than anger: clarity. She looked around the room, her voice carrying across the marble walls. "I may stumble, I may fall, but I will always rise again. And tonight, everyone here will see exactly what I am capable of." The crowd stirred, sensing the tide turning once more. The collapse had ended. The rise was coming. And as Victor's smirk faltered, the city lights beyond the glass seemed to flicker brighter, as though heralding the moment of her rebirth. The crowd waited, holding their breath, the air thick with anticipation. Helena Carter stood tall again, her eyes clear, her voice steady. The moment of collapse had passed. What remained was a woman transformed. No longer the discarded wife, no longer the broken victim, but someone about to reveal the truth Victor Hayes had never imagined. Victor tried to laugh, though it sounded brittle. "What are you babbling about now, Elena? You've embarrassed yourself enough. Go home, wherever that is these days. Leave this place to people who belong." Elena's lips curved into a small smile. "That's the thing, Victor. This place is my home. It always has been. And tonight, I think it's time everyone learns the truth." The crowd stirred. A journalist discreetly lifted his camera. Investors leaned forward, sensing something monumental. Even Serena clutched her sequined gown, her eyes darting nervously between them. Elena took a slow step forward, her hand brushing the edge of the marble table. "Years ago, before I ever met you, my father built something extraordinary. He was a man who valued privacy, who believed wealth should never dictate character. So he kept his empire hidden, layers of trusts, private holdings, companies scattered across the globe. To the world, he was simply a successful businessman. But in reality, he was one of the wealthiest men in America." Gasps echoed. A few jaws dropped. "My father left it all to me," Elena continued, her voice unwavering. "Every property, every company, every share. For years, I chose to live quietly, modestly, because I didn't want wealth to define me. I wanted love, family, something real. That's why I never told you, Victor. Because I wanted to believe you saw me for who I was, not what I had." The silence was deafening. Only the sound of clinking ice from an abandoned glass punctuated the air. Victor's face drained of color. "You're lying." Elena tilted her head. "Am I? Then perhaps you should explain why this penthouse, this very penthouse you've paraded as yours, isn't in your name. Why every bill, every deed, every mortgage has my signature on it. Because this penthouse is mine, Victor. It has always been mine." The crowd erupted. Investors whispered furiously, some pulling out their phones, already checking records. Serena stumbled back, her confidence dissolving. Victor tried again, his voice shaking. "Even if that's true, you still don't matter. You don't belong in this world of power." Elena stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "Don't I? I own stakes in companies across 5 continents. I control shipping lines, tech firms, luxury hotels. My signature moves billions every year. And you?" She paused, her words sharp as glass. "You were just a man I once loved. A man too blind to see who I truly was. Too arrogant to realize you were married to someone far more powerful than you could ever be." The room erupted again, louder this time. Investors exchanged glances filled with calculation. For years they had aligned themselves with Victor, believing him untouchable. But tonight, they saw the truth. The real power had never been his. Victor staggered, his hands trembling. "No, you can't." "Yes, I can. Elena's voice sliced through his denial. Do you want to know the cruelest part, Victor? While you mocked me as broke, while you laughed about me being nothing, I could have bought and sold you 100 times over. But I didn't, because I didn't need to prove myself to you. But now? Her gaze swept the room, catching every pair of eyes. Now I do. Not for me, but for my child. For the future we deserve. Serena's face twisted in disbelief. So you're saying you're the billionaire? Elena turned to her, her expression almost pitying. Yes, I am the billionaire you both mocked, and tonight the truth sets me free. The silence stretched, then fractured into chaos. Investors surrounded one another, furious whispers of deals gone wrong, of lies Victor had told. Some demanded answers. Others slipped away, unwilling to be associated with a man whose empire had just been revealed as a fraud. Victor's mask crumbled completely. He lunged toward Elena, his voice ragged. You think this changes anything? You think they'll respect you? You're still just... Elena raised a hand, stopping him cold. Careful, Victor. Every insult you speak now only proves to them what I've known all along. You were never a man of class, never a man of honor. You're nothing without the lies you built. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. For the first time, Victor wasn't the center of admiration. He was the center of shame. Charles Beaumont, the silver-haired investor, stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Elena. Mrs. Carter, he said respectfully, if what you say is true, then I think we all know who the real power in this room is. Elena nodded graciously, her eyes softening. It is true, and I will prove it. But tonight isn't about flaunting power. Tonight is about reclaiming dignity. For too long, I was silent. For too long, I let cruelty define me. No more. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then grew stronger. Some clapped in admiration, others out of fear of what she now represented. But in that moment, Elena didn't care. She wasn't here for their approval. She was here for justice. Victor staggered back, his face pale, sweat glistening at his temples. He had lost. The mistress at his side slipped away quietly, unwilling to share in his downfall. The investors who had once propped him up now turned their backs. His empire, his image, his pride, it all collapsed before his eyes. And Elena stood in the center of it all, radiant, unshaken, untouchable. The twist was complete. The woman mocked as broke was in fact the billionaire who owned everything he thought was his. And now, the world knew it. The night of the Penthouse confrontation left the city buzzing. Newspapers splashed headlines across their front pages. Discarded wife revealed as billionaire heiress, Victor Hayes exposed, power shifts in Manhattan. Social media exploded with photos of Elena standing in ivory, hand on her belly, while Victor looked on in stunned humiliation. But for Elena, the headlines were only the beginning. Her true transformation didn't happen under the chandeliers of that penthouse. It began the next morning, in the quiet of her own reflection. She stood before a mirror in her father's old townhouse, the dawn light painting her face in gold. For the first time in months, her eyes didn't look tired. They looked alive. The woman staring back was not the timid wife who had once begged for scraps of affection. She was not the broken soul who had cried in a motel room, whispering apologies to her unborn child. No, this woman was steel wrapped in grace, fire hidden in calm. She reached for a necklace, her mother's heirloom. The pendant was simple, a sapphire set in gold, but it carried generations of dignity. Elena fastened it around her neck with trembling fingers. It was more than jewelry, it was a crown. That day she called her team of lawyers, financial advisors, and longtime family allies. She had avoided them for years, too focused on love, too afraid of what wealth could turn her into. But now, she embraced their presence. They greeted her with respect, not pity. Mrs. Carter, they said, voices steady, it's time we take back what is yours. Her wardrobe changed too, not for vanity, but for symbolism. Gone were the soft dresses that made her blend into the background. She chose tailored gowns that spoke of elegance, power, and authority. A deep navy dress for meetings, crimson silk for galas, black velvet for press appearances. Each choice was deliberate, a silent declaration, I am no longer invisible. But the transformation went beyond clothing. It was in her voice, her posture, her decisions. She walked into boardrooms once dominated by men like Victor and spoke with calm authority. She unveiled strategies for companies her father had left, revitalized projects Victor had mocked her for even mentioning. She spoke not with arrogance but with conviction, and even the most skeptical investors found themselves leaning forward, captivated. The media couldn't get enough. Cameras followed her every move, dubbing her the pregnant billionaire, a symbol of resilience and rebirth. Women across the city wrote letters to her, thanking her for showing that strength could rise from betrayal. Men who had once ignored her now begged for meetings. Yet through it all, Alina remained grounded, her hand often resting on her belly as a reminder of her true purpose, the child who gave her courage. Victor, meanwhile, spiraled. His calls went unanswered. His investors fled. Serena abandoned him within days, photographed on the arm of another wealthy man. He raged, spreading lies about Alina, claiming she was manipulating everyone, but the world no longer listened. His empire crumbled as swiftly as his pride. Alina did not gloat. She didn't need to. Watching him fade was satisfaction enough. Her focus was not on revenge for its own sake. It was on transformation, on building something new from the ashes of her pain. Weeks passed and her influence grew. Invitations flooded in, galas, charity balls, conferences. At first, she hesitated. She remembered the cruelty of high society, the way they had laughed at her. But this time she would not walk into their rooms as prey. She would walk in as the storm. Her most symbolic transformation came on the night of the Manhattan Winter Gala. It was the very same event where Victor had once mocked her behind her back, parading Serena like a jewel. Now the city buzzed with anticipation. Alina Carter was attending, and everyone wanted to see her. She arrived in a sleek black gown that hugged her figure, her pregnancy visible yet regal. A diamond bracelet glimmered at her wrist, not borrowed or gifted by a man, but chosen by herself. The sapphire pendant still hung around her neck, her mother's silent blessing. When she entered the ballroom, silence fell, just as it had in the Penthouse weeks earlier. But this silence was different. It was not mockery. It was reverence. Alina Carter, the announcer declared, heiress, philanthropist, and business leader. Applause erupted. Not hesitant, not forced, genuine. She walked through the crowd with her head high, acknowledging nods, offering smiles. Women approached her with admiration. Men extended hands, eager for alliances. She was no longer Victor's ex-wife. She was Alina Carter, a force in her own right. At the gala, a journalist asked her, "What message do you want the world to take from your story?" Alina paused, her hand resting gently on her belly. Her voice was calm, but carried through the hall. That dignity cannot be stolen. That strength often grows in silence. And that women, no matter how broken we may feel, are capable of rebuilding empires from ashes. This isn't just my transformation. It's a reminder to every woman watching that we are not defined by the men who betray us. We define ourselves. The room erupted in applause again, louder this time. Victor, though uninvited, had attempted to sneak into the gala. From the shadows he watched, seething, as the woman he once ridiculed commanded the room effortlessly. She had transformed beyond his reach, beyond his insults, beyond his power. For the first time he realized he could never control her again. And Alina knew it too. She didn't need his acknowledgement. She didn't even need his downfall. Her transformation was complete not because she defeated Victor, but because she reclaimed herself. The city skyline sparkled outside the ballroom windows, a reflection of the fire now alive in her soul. The timid wife was gone. In her place stood a woman reborn, powerful, radiant, unstoppable. And the world would never forget her name again. The city had already crowned Alina Carter its new queen of resilience. But her story was far from over. Victor Hayes still lingered like a shadow in the background, refusing to fade quietly. Though his empire crumbled, his arrogance had not. He still told anyone who would listen that Alina's fortune was exaggerated, that she had manipulated the press, that she was nothing but a dramatic liar. Alina knew she could ignore him and still win. But she also knew the world needed closure. There could be no lingering doubt, no whisper that Victor still held power. Her revenge would not be petty. It would be public, undeniable, and final. The opportunity came at the International Business Forum Gala, a prestigious event where the city's most powerful gathered. For years, Victor had dreamed of being the keynote speaker, the man on stage commanding respect. This year, however, the honor was Alina's. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, the air buzzing with anticipation. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns filled the space, their conversations swirling with rumors of what Elena might say. At the far end of the room stood a massive stage draped in velvet, where a crystal podium awaited. Victor, uninvited yet again, still found his way in. He stood near the back, glass of whiskey in hand, his eyes fixed on Elena like daggers. He told himself he still had power, that he could disrupt her speech, expose her as weak. But deep down, he knew he was outmatched. When Elena entered, the crowd hushed. She wore a deep emerald gown that glowed against her skin, her sapphire pendant resting proudly on her chest. Her pregnancy was more visible now, yet it only enhanced her presence. She looked not like a woman weighed down, but like a queen carrying the future itself. She took the stage to thunderous applause. The lights reflected in her eyes as she looked out over the sea of faces. Slowly, deliberately, she began. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you tonight, not just as a business leader, but as a woman who has walked through fire and come out whole. Many of you know pieces of my story. You've read the headlines, heard the whispers. But tonight, I will tell you the truth, not for gossip, but for justice. The room fell silent. Even Victor froze. Elena continued, her voice clear and unwavering. I married a man who I believed loved me. I gave him my heart, my loyalty, my trust. In return, he gave me betrayal. He mocked me, abandoned me while I carried our child, and told the world I was worthless. He stood in the penthouse my father left me, and he called it his own. He told his friends I was broke, even as I silently carried an empire in my hands. Gasps swept through the audience. Cameras flashed. Journalists scribbled notes furiously. But tonight, Elena said, her gaze sweeping the room, we close that chapter, because betrayal cannot destroy truth. Lies cannot erase dignity, and no man has the right to decide a woman's worth. Thunderous applause broke out, but Elena raised a hand, calling for silence. And to those who still doubt me, she said, her tone sharp now, I offer proof. At her signal, a large screen behind her flickered to life. Documents appeared. Ownership deeds of the Penthouse, shareholder lists from global companies, bank records tying her fortune back generations. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Every claim Victor had ever made about her being broke crumbled in that instant. The crowd erupted into cheers, gasps, and applause. Investors stood, clapping in respect. Women in the audience wept openly. The screen scrolled with proof after proof, sealing her legacy in stone. Victor's face turned ashen. He stumbled back, his whiskey spilling. No, this can't be real, he muttered. She's tricking you all. But the room no longer listened. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Elena looked directly at him, her voice like thunder. You told the world I was broke, Victor. You humiliated me in front of strangers. You discarded me like I was nothing. Tonight, I return the favor. Tonight, the world sees you for what you are. A man who built nothing, who stole credit, who mocked the woman who could have been your greatest ally. You didn't just lose me, Victor. You lost everything. The crowd roared with applause, some even chanting her name. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing every angle. Victor's humiliation was complete. He was no longer a mogul, no longer feared, no longer respected. He was a broken man standing in the ruins of his lies. Serena, once his mistress, was also in the crowd. She turned away from him, ashamed, unwilling to be associated with his downfall. Investors who had once begged for his attention now surrounded Elena, offering alliances, partnerships, admiration. Elena raised her hand once more, her final words echoing like a hammer striking stone. This is not just my revenge. This is a warning to every man who believes he can tear down a woman and walk away unscathed. We rise. We rebuild. And when we return stronger than you can imagine. The room exploded into standing ovations, thunderous claps reverberating off the golden walls. Elena Carter had not only reclaimed her dignity, she had publicly destroyed the man who betrayed her, ensuring his downfall was permanent. Victor slumped against the wall, defeated. For the first time, he realized Elena was untouchable. She had won, not through cruelty, not through lies, but through truth, dignity, and undeniable strength. And as the crowd cheered her name, Elena stood radiant, hand resting on her belly. She had given the world its spectacle, its reckoning, its justice. The public revenge was complete. And from this night forward, no one would ever doubt her again. The The night of the International Business Forum Gala ended with Elena Carter standing as the undeniable victor. The applause still echoed in her ears as she returned to her townhouse, the sapphire pendant warm against her skin, her hand gently resting on her belly. For the first time in a long time, she felt peace. The storm had passed. Victor Hayes had been silenced, not by threats or scandals, but by truth. His empire collapsed in the days that followed. Investors abandoned him, creditors circled, and the media painted him not as a mogul, but as a fraud. He retreated into the shadows, a broken man with no throne left to sit upon. Serena was gone. The socialites who once fawned over him turned their backs, and his name became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Don't build castles on lies. Elena, however, was just beginning. Her transformation from abandoned wife to billionaire heiress was no longer just a personal journey. It became a movement. Women across the country wrote letters, sharing their own stories of betrayal, abuse, and survival. They saw in Elena not just wealth, but resilience, dignity, and proof that no woman was truly powerless. Moved by their words, Elena launched the Carter Foundation for Women and Children, dedicated to helping those left with nothing after betrayal. The foundation provided housing for single mothers, scholarships for young women, and legal aid for those fighting for justice. Elena poured her heart into it, determined that no woman would ever feel as alone as she once had. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the foundation's first shelter, journalists swarmed her, microphones thrust forward. One asked, "Elena, what drives you to do this after everything you've been through?" Elena smiled softly, her eyes bright with conviction. Because pain should never be wasted. If I suffered, it wasn't for nothing. It was to show others that from the deepest wounds, we can build the strongest foundations. I want every woman to know, betrayal may break you, but it does not define you. You define you. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed, and across the nation, women wiped tears from their eyes, inspired by her words. Months passed, and Elena's influence grew beyond business. She became a speaker at global conferences, advocating for women in leadership. She was invited to universities, where young students listened eagerly as she spoke of dignity, resilience, and power. Everywhere she went, she carried her child with her, sometimes in her arms, sometimes still within her, always as a symbol of the strength that had carried her through. When her son was born, she named him Gabriel, after the angel who brings messages of hope. Holding him for the first time, she whispered, "You saved me before you even arrived. And now I'll make sure the world you grow up in is worthy of you." The media celebrated his birth, but for Elena, it was personal. Gabriel was the reason she had stood tall, the reason she had refused to let Victor's cruelty destroy her. He was her anchor, her reminder that love, real love, was still possible. Victor by then was nothing more than a ghost of the past. Occasionally tabloids would catch him wandering drunkenly out of a bar, his suit wrinkled, his face hollow. The world no longer cared about him. His name brought only pity, not power, and Elena never spoke his name again. To her, he was finished. Her focus was on building, not destroying. She expanded her businesses, modernized her father's empire, and used her wealth to uplift others. She no longer shrank from cameras or whispered apologies for existing. She stood proudly, a woman who had faced betrayal and turned it into strength. At one of her last public speeches that year, in front of a packed auditorium filled with women, she told her story one final time, not to relive the pain but to remind them of the ending. "I was once the woman you saw mocked, discarded, called broke, and irrelevant. I was told I had no worth. I believed those lies for too long. But here's the truth. Your worth is never decided by someone else's opinion of you. Your worth is written in your dignity, your resilience, your refusal to give up. I stand here not as Victor Hayes' ex-wife, but as Elena Carter, mother, leader, survivor. And if I can rise, so can you." The crowd stood, cheering, tears streaming down faces. Women hugged one another, strangers united by the hope Elena had given them. As the applause thundered, Elena glanced down at Gabriel sleeping peacefully in his stroller, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. She smiled. This was her legacy. Not the wealth, not the power, not even the headlines. Her legacy was the proof that women could rise from betrayal stronger than before. That night, as she looked out over the city skyline from her penthouse, Elena whispered softly, "It's over. We made it." The city lights twinkled in response, as if bowing to her. The pain, the humiliation, the collapse, it had all led here. To dignity restored, to justice delivered, to hope reborn. And the world, watching her story, would never again doubt the strength of a woman betrayed. Because Elena Carter had proven that when a woman rises, she doesn't just rise for herself, she rises for everyone. So that's it, my dear friends. Our story has come to a close. And if you're still here with me right now, it means something in this journey has touched your heart in a special way. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles, or maybe it gave you the strength to believe again. The Stoics once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what Elena's story shows us. Betrayal, loss, and humiliation can break us for a moment, but they don't define us. What defines us is how we rise, how we choose dignity over despair, and how we turn pain into purpose. So let's carry that lesson with us.
Mistress arrogantly slaps pregnant wife, but millionaire immediately teaches her a brutal lesson. Whispered warnings about the downfall of a good marriage almost always come too late, and by then, hearts are already broken. Inside a sun-drenched mansion on the outskirts of Chicago, an unsuspecting pregnant wife would soon learn that betrayal lurked behind even the most polished smiles. Within these marbled halls, secrets collided, forcing everyone to reveal their true colors. The moment a brazen mistress raised her hand against an innocent mother-to-be, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown that would shake their entire world. Little did they know, a formidable billionaire sister was about to unleash her unstoppable wrath. Amelia Carter stood in the lavish foyer of the Carter mansion, her hand gently resting on the swell of her belly. She was nearly 5 months pregnant, and each passing day brought a fresh wave of hope and anticipation. The entire house, gilded with Renaissance-era artwork and pristine marble floors, was a testament to the old money and success of the Carter lineage. Yet despite the grandeur around her, Amelia felt uneasy. She could not shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Christopher Carter, her husband, emerged from his study with a grim expression. The tension in the house felt as thick as the stagnant August air outside. For the last few weeks, there had been strange phone calls at odd hours, suspicious text messages that Christopher dismissed with a forced laugh, and the unsettling notion that a presence lingered in the shadows of their relationship. Whenever Amelia asked him directly if something was amiss, he offered a gentle smile that failed to reach his eyes. He would pat her on the shoulder and say, "You're overthinking, darling. I promise everything is fine." On this particular day, Amelia's heart pulsed faster than usual. The baby, as though sharing its mother's intuition, gave a strong kick in protest. The sound of footsteps, heavy, purposeful, echoed through the hallway. Something about that stride felt out of place. She parted her lips to call out Christopher's name, but before she could utter a sound, another figure stepped in. Veronica James, with sharp hazel eyes and a model's poise, glided in like she owned the place. She was tall, elegantly dressed in a slim, fit black dress that accentuated her figure, and sporting an arrogant smirk that suggested she harbored no fear of discovery. Her lipstick was a daring scarlet that matched the color of her perfectly manicured nails. There was a mocking confidence in her posture, as though she had already declared victory over a war Amelia did not even know had begun. "Christopher, you told me I could drop by whenever I wanted," Veronica announced, letting the echo of her heels strike the marble. "But you never mentioned your little wife would be home today." Amelia stiffened. The audacity in Veronica's voice, the condescending glance up and down Amelia's body, said all she needed to know. In that moment, something inside Amelia broke. The illusions of trust she'd clung to over the past several months shattered around her. She had naively hoped her suspicions were unfounded. She had prayed that Christopher would never betray her, especially while she was carrying their child. Christopher came rushing out of his study, face pale. He shot Amelia an imploring look, as though silently pleading for her forgiveness, even before she could process the full weight of what was happening. "Veronica, the first told you to wait for me to call," he hissed through gritted teeth. "This is not a good time." A wicked gleam shone in Veronica's eyes. She ignored Christopher's warning and sauntered deeper into the foyer, her heels snapping against the marble. Her attention flicked from the swirling staircase to the antique chandelier overhead, and finally to Amelia's face. "I can't imagine a better time," she retorted, her voice dripping with an arrogance that set every nerve in Amelia's body on edge. "After all, I only want what's best for your husband." Amelia tried to maintain her composure, but she couldn't stop her eyes from brimming with tears. "Christopher," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what is this? Who is she?" Veronica let out a short, cruel laugh. "I'm Veronica James, darling. I'm Christopher's confidant," she said, carefully choosing her words. She cast a sideways glance at Christopher, who clutched his hair in desperation. "He promised to help me launch my new fashion boutique. We've been collaborating for quite a while now." The baby kicked again, a frantic reminder that Amelia had more than just her own life to protect. She straightened her spine, stepping forward to confront this woman who had intruded upon her home and her marriage. "If you want his help with your business, you can set up an appointment at his office." Her voice was surprisingly firm, even though she felt a tempest raging within her. "You don't belong here." Veronica's lips curled. "You think you can talk to me like that?" She took a measured step toward Amelia, eyes narrowed. "Don't try to play the saint, Amelia. You might be pregnant, but that doesn't make you untouchable." Christopher tried to step between them. "Stop it, Veronica. This is not what we agreed." But Veronica silenced him with a glare so venomous it could have stripped paint from the walls. Then she turned her full attention to Amelia, who stood as resolute as she could. "Your husband and I have shared intimate secrets, far more intimate than you might realize. Did he tell you about our trip to New York last month, or the weekend we spent at that private villa in the Bahamas?" Amelia's heart thundered in her chest. She didn't want to believe a word of it, yet the evidence spoke louder than her desperate hopes. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she refused to crumble. "How could you do this?" she asked, her voice breaking. Veronica's scornful grin widened. "He's mine now," she said simply, and then, without warning, her hand whipped across Amelia's cheek with a force that echoed in the silent hall. The crack of the slap reverberated along the walls, freezing Christopher in place. Time seemed to stop. Amelia's face stung, tears spilling freely. She raised a trembling hand to her cheek. Veronica stood there, chest heaving, her face contorted with righteous entitlement. And Amelia understood, in that single heartbreaking instant, that her world had changed forever. She felt Christopher's arms catch her from behind as her legs wobbled. The baby's movement was urgent now, as though protesting the violent intrusion. She could barely see through the tears, but she could hear Veronica's mocking laughter. As the echo of the slap settled, it was replaced by a profound, soul-crushing silence. A hush draped the foyer like a shroud, and the memory of that slap hung in the air, etching itself into the foundation of the Carter family. Deep down, Amelia knew she would never be the same again. The mansion, once her safe haven, now seemed like a foreign battlefield, strewn with the debris of her trust. Yet, in that swirling maelstrom of confusion and hurt, a single question flared inside Amelia's mind, giving her an ember of hope. What will Ariana do when she finds out? Ariana Carter was a name whispered with both reverence and envy across international business circles. Rumored to be one of the savviest tech moguls in the country, Ariana had established an empire that stretched from Silicon Valley to the bustling financial districts of Singapore. She'd been featured in major publications, Forbes, Business Insider, and even the Wall Street Journal, all praising her extraordinary ability to transform failing companies into multi-million-dollar success stories. When Ariana walked into a boardroom, bankers, investors, and CEOs alike held their breath. Despite all her success, Ariana rarely flaunted her wealth. She kept a mansion in Bel-Air and another on the outskirts of London, but rarely stayed in either place for long. She was constantly on the move, attending conferences, spearheading philanthropic initiatives, or striking deals that made global headlines. Yet, if there was one thing Ariana Carter would never ignore, it was a call from her family. When Amelia first met Christopher, Ariana had offered her blessings with cautious optimism. She was protective of her younger sister, having watched Amelia navigate heartbreak and betrayal in previous relationships. Ariana had done her best to reassure herself that Christopher was different, that he would provide the stability Amelia so deeply craved. The day Amelia announced her pregnancy, Ariana flew back to Chicago to personally congratulate her sister, showering her with extravagant gifts and heartfelt advice. She had even told Christopher, "You'd better take care of her. She's the only sister I have." But Ariana had no inkling of the storm brewing inside the Carter mansion. So when Amelia, tears in her eyes and voice trembling, called Ariana late that evening, the billionaire sister's entire schedule cleared instantly. She cancelled an overseas trip to Dubai for an important tech summit and booked a direct flight back to Chicago within the hour. The pilot, accustomed to Ariana's sudden changes in itinerary, found a way to get her private jet airborne by sunrise. Ariana spent the flight tapping away at her laptop, but her mind kept drifting to Amelia's broken sobs over the phone. The words she'd managed to squeeze out, "I can't believe it's happening, Ariana. She slapped me and Christopher. He stood there just. He's been cheating with Veronica James, had unleashed a fury Ariana hadn't felt in years." As the jet soared through the clouds, Ariana couldn't help but reflect on the times she had tried to caution Amelia about the cunning circles of wealth and power. She remembered how Amelia had insisted Christopher wasn't like other men, that his heart was pure and his love unshakable. Now, Ariana fought to control her mounting rage. How dare he cheat on my pregnant sister? How dare that mistress raise a hand against Amelia? Her fists tightened around the pen she was holding, nearly snapping it. She didn't know who Veronica James was, but if that woman thought she could assault a Carter and face no consequences, she was in for a brutal reckoning. When Ariana arrived in Chicago, the first thing she learned was that Amelia had been taken to a hospital. The stress of the confrontation, coupled with the force of the slap, had led to complications. Fearing for the baby's safety, Christopher had rushed Amelia to a private medical facility where Dr. Cynthia Wilson, one of the top OB-GYNs in the city, was examining her. Ariana wasted no time. Dressed in a sleek black pantsuit, her hair pulled back into a tight chignon, she strode into the hospital lobby. A swarm of paparazzi, somehow tipped off to her arrival, snapped photos, but Ariana brushed them aside without a word. Her top priority was her sister, not the headlines. She found Christopher pacing outside Amelia's private room, face drawn and grey. He looked as though he hadn't slept in days. The second he saw Ariana, he rushed forward with trembling hands. "Ariana, But Ariana wasn't interested in hearing him out. She slapped him across the face, not with the reckless hatred that Veronica had shown, but with a deliberate, stinging force that snapped his head back. Gasps rippled through the corridor, but Ariana didn't care. "That's for betraying my sister," she said in a voice that was ice cold, the kind of tone that even seasoned board members knew better than to challenge. If Amelia loses this baby, I swear, Christopher, your life will never be the same. Christopher rubbed his stinging cheek, tears brimming in his eyes. I never meant for any of this to happen, he croaked. Veronica, she was just. Shut up, Ariana ordered, stepping closer. She wasn't tall, but the fury radiating from her made her look like a giant. We'll talk later. After I see my sister. Pushing past him, Ariana entered Amelia's room. The space was serene, filled with the low hum of machines monitoring Amelia's vitals. Amelia lay there, pale and fragile-looking, her hand resting protectively over her belly. When she saw Ariana, her eyes welled up. "I'm sorry you had to fly all this way," she whispered. "I know how busy you are." Ariana's heart ached. She strode over and gently clasped Amelia's hand. "Don't be sorry," she said softly, leaning in to plant a kiss on her sister's forehead. "I should be the one apologizing for not being here. I'm going to make this right, Amelia." Dr. Cynthia Wilson stepped in, a kind-faced woman with a reassuring presence. "Miss S. Carter is stable for now," she reported in a hushed tone. "We managed to calm her vitals, and the baby is showing normal signs, but we have to keep her under observation. Stress is the worst thing for her right now." Ariana nodded her understanding and let out a slow breath. Anger still simmered in her chest, but she knew she had to be calm for Amelia's sake. She gave her sister's hand a squeeze. "I'll take care of everything," she whispered. "Just focus on getting better. Don't you worry about Christopher or Veronica." Amelia opened her mouth to speak, but the weight of her heartbreak was too heavy. Tears dripped onto the hospital gown, and Ariana gently wiped them away. "Rest," Ariana insisted. "I've got this." Outside, Christopher waited with his hands clasped together, as though he were about to face a firing squad. Ariana exited the room, shutting the door behind her. Their eyes locked, and for a moment the corridor felt like a battlefield. "Talk," Ariana said, folding her arms. "I want every detail, and I want it now." Christopher sagged against the wall, burying his face in his hands. "I made a mistake," he began, voice trembling. "Veronica James is a friend of a friend. She approached me about investing in her fashion boutique, and I thought it was just business at first. But then one thing led to another, and I can't even explain it. I never thought I'd do something like this to Amelia." Ariana's steely gaze never wavered. "This is beyond a mistake. You cheated on your pregnant wife." Her voice rose slightly, making a passing nurse snap her head around in alarm. "You've humiliated her, and you let that woman assault her in your own home. Let me be crystal clear, Christopher. If you think you can slip out of this with a measly apology, you're sorely mistaken." Christopher swallowed hard. "I love Amelia, Ariana. I do. I just got lost." Veronica was so persistent. She threatened to go public with everything if I didn't keep meeting her demands. I was worried about the scandal hurting Amelia and the baby. "Don't spin this," Ariana cut him off. "You made your bed. Now you have to deal with the consequences. For now, stay away from Amelia unless you can be absolutely certain you won't stress her out. If you upset her any further, so help me, Christopher." He nodded miserably, like a schoolboy caught stealing. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. "Oh, I assure you, you will," Ariana snapped. This is not over. Later that day, Ariana left the hospital and drove directly to the Carter mansion. As she entered, the silence in the vast corridors felt oppressive, as though even the house was holding its breath after the day's explosive drama. Ariana scanned the rooms, her steps echoing against the marble. Finally, she found Veronica. James seated in the drawing room, leisurely sipping a cup of tea as though nothing were amiss. Veronica looked up, a smirk crossing her face. She set down her cup on the mahogany table with a precise clink. Ariana Carter, I presume? I've heard so much about you, she purred, feigning politeness. Ariana did not return the smile. She positioned herself across from Veronica, arms crossed, stance wide. Leave, she ordered, voice low. Whatever game you think you're playing, it ends now. But Veronica only laughed a high, mocking sound that reverberated off the gilded walls. What an entrance! And here I was expecting some gracious conversation. Are you sure you don't want tea? This is a delightful Earl Grey. Ariana's jaw tightened. She was not used to her authority being challenged. You have 5 minutes to pack up and get out of my sister's home. If you don't, I'll have security escort you out. And trust me, I'm not one to bluff. Veronica leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with regal indifference. Now, why would I leave willingly? Christopher wants me here, and if you haven't heard, we've been quite close. A flicker of rage flashed across Ariana's eyes. She hadn't come here to debate. I know exactly who you are and what you've done, she hissed. You assaulted my pregnant sister. If you think there won't be legal repercussions, you're dead wrong. I've already contacted one of the best attorneys in the state, Michael Jacobs. He's more than ready to file assault charges. The mention of legal action made Veronica's smirk falter, but only for a second. She quickly recovered, flipping her hair with a casual shrug. You want to take me to court? Fine, go ahead. But I'm sure the media will have a field day once I reveal the details of Christopher's indiscretions. By the time I'm done, your family name will be in tatters. Unfazed, Ariana leaned in, her voice dropping to a near whisper. You think you can blackmail me with scandal? You might want to do your research on how I handle blackmailers. Veronica's posture stiffened. We'll see, she said, though her confidence seemed slightly rattled. You can't protect Christopher from the choices he's made. He came to me, Ariana. And if your precious sister was more exciting, maybe he wouldn't have strayed in the first place. Ariana's vision blurred with white-hot anger. She had heard enough. With a quick gesture, she pulled out her phone. Lucas Rogers, she said into it, naming the head of her personal security team stationed outside. Come in. A moment later, Lucas Rogers, a towering, broad-shouldered man, entered the drawing room with 2 other security officers. Their presence, swift and imposing, made Veronica's eyes widen in real fear. Ariana pointed at Veronica. Miss James is leaving immediately. Ensure she doesn't take any property that isn't hers. Then escort her off the premises. Veronica's outrage ignited. She jumped to her feet, her face twisted in fury. You can't do this, she spat. Christopher said I could stay. Ariana's calm smile was more chilling than any roar. Christopher doesn't have a say anymore. This is my sister's house, and her name is on the deed. If you want to fight in court, be my guest. But I'm done playing this ridiculous game. Now, get out. Lucas and the 2 officers advanced. Veronica grabbed her purse in a huff, throwing a lethal glare at Ariana as she stomped toward the door. This isn't over, she shouted, her voice echoing down the grand hallway. I'm counting on it, Ariana replied under her breath. And just like that, Veronica was gone, booted from the Carter mansion in a humiliating display she would not soon forget. Ariana exhaled slowly, a momentary rush of satisfaction warming her veins. Yet she knew the real battle was just beginning. Veronica was not the type to walk away gracefully, and Christopher's betrayal had fractured Amelia's heart. There was still a mountain of anguish to scale before the situation could be set right. If it could be set right at all. Over the following days, Amelia remained in the hospital under careful observation. Ariana visited daily, bringing gourmet lunches, stacks of magazines, and even a few business journals to keep Amelia's mind occupied. Despite these efforts, Amelia struggled to find peace. Her eyes still held the haunted look of someone who had watched her dreams disintegrate before her very eyes. Meanwhile, Christopher was caught in a whirlwind. He was forced to address mounting inquiries from both the press and his own family, who were scandalized by rumors swirling around Veronica James. Some tabloids caught wind that the mistress had been unceremoniously thrown out of the Carter mansion, fueling sensational headlines like "Heir to the Carter Fortune in Shocking Love Triangle" and "Billionaire Sister Intervenes in Scandalous Affair." In the midst of this media frenzy, Ariana maintained a measured, almost surgical approach. She had her lawyers file a protective order against Veronica for the assault on Amelia, ensuring that Veronica would face charges if she attempted contact. But Ariana knew that legal measures alone wouldn't extinguish Veronica's thirst for vengeance. If Veronica had damaging information about Christopher, she could still wreak havoc by going public. And while Ariana was fiercely protective of her sister, she also recognized the precarious balance between saving Amelia's sanity and crushing Veronica's schemes. One afternoon, Ariana sat at Amelia's bedside. Amelia stared at her reflection in a small handheld mirror, unconsciously touching the faint bruise that remained on her cheek. "I keep thinking this is some nightmare I'll wake up from," Amelia said softly. "Christopher was so kind to me at the beginning. I don't know this person he's turned into." Ariana sighed, reaching over to take the mirror from Amelia's hand. "He made a terrible mistake. I can't speak for him, but I'll make sure you're protected, no matter what." Amelia nodded, tears glistening. "Thank you for everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." Just then, Christopher walked in, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. He approached cautiously, as though expecting Ariana to pounce. "Amelia," he said, voice thick with regret, "I wanted to check on you." Ariana rose to her feet, sizing him up with narrowed eyes. He shot her a pleading look. "May I have a moment alone with my wife?" Amelia's eyes flicked to Ariana. After a short, tense pause, Amelia nodded. "Just a few minutes." Ariana hesitated but finally stepped out of the room. She lingered by the door, arms folded, prepared to intervene if Christopher caused the slightest distress. Inside, Christopher set the lilies on a side table. "They're your favorite," he said quietly. "I remember how you used to say their fragrance reminded you of spring mornings on your grandmother's farm." Amelia looked at the flowers without emotion. "I can't forget what you've done, but this baby, it's ours. I'm only thinking of how to keep my stress down for the child's sake." Christopher rubbed his neck, anguish etched into his features. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. What I did was inexcusable. Veronica was never supposed to mean anything. She blackmailed me, threatened to ruin my career and yours if I didn't comply. I was weak. I should have come to you, told you the truth." Amelia's face softened for a moment, but she quickly hardened again. "I don't want to talk about Veronica," she said. "And I'm tired. I need rest." He bowed his head. "Okay, I'll go. But please know I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." When Ariana re-entered, she found Amelia with tears rolling silently down her cheeks. The exhaustion in her sister's eyes spoke volumes. Ariana understood that Christopher's remorse might be genuine, but the damage was severe. Amelia would need time, and possibly more than time, to heal from this betrayal. No sooner had Ariana gotten a semblance of control over the situation than a shocking development plunged the entire fiasco into deeper chaos. One morning, Ariana's personal assistant, Carmen Rogers, burst into Ariana's penthouse suite at the Four Seasons Hotel with panic in her eyes. "Ariana, we have an issue," Carmen said, nearly breathless. "Veronica James just released a tell-all interview online." Ariana's fingers flew over her laptop keyboard, calling up the website in question. There it was, a sensational tabloid piece. Veronica James reveals the ugly truth behind Christopher Carter's marriage. In the article, Veronica spewed vile accusations, claiming Amelia was a manipulative spouse who ignored Christopher's needs, that Amelia drove Christopher into her arms, and even that Amelia had plotted to trap Christopher with the pregnancy. Ariana could feel her anger spike with every venomous sentence. Veronica twisted the narrative expertly, painting herself as the misunderstood victim. Worse yet, she hinted at possessing intimate photos and potential recordings of her time with Christopher, threatening to release them unless justice was served. It was vile blackmail disguised as a public appeal. Gritting her teeth, Ariana took a calming breath and called Michael Jacobs, her family's lead attorney. He answered on the first ring. "I've seen the article," Michael said immediately. "We can pursue defamation charges, but the burden of proof can be tricky." She's using suggestive language rather than outright stating facts. "We might tie her up in court, but if she truly has compromising material on Christopher, this could get messier." Ariana's mind spun. She needed a more direct approach, something that would neutralize Veronica's threats immediately. "Let's consider an injunction to prevent her from releasing any alleged recordings until the assault case is resolved," she suggested. Michael hesitated. "We can try, but it'll depend on the judge. These matters can be complicated if Veronica claims it's her personal property." "Do it anyway," Ariana ordered. "Time is of the essence." As she hung up, Ariana realized she was stepping onto a battlefield that demanded more than just lawyers and gag orders. Veronica was determined to destroy Amelia's reputation as well. Ariana's phone buzzed again this time, with calls from journalists, business colleagues, and even friends from her philanthropic circles. Everyone wanted a comment on the scandal. If Ariana stayed silent too long, the narrative Veronica was spinning would become the dominant one. Summoning her assistant, Ariana said, "Carmen, schedule a press conference. Keep it private, just the major outlets. I'm going to address this head-on." Carmen's eyes widened. "Are you sure that's wise? The media is feasting on this." Ariana squared her shoulders. "I don't care. If Veronica thinks she can bully my sister into silence, she has another thing coming." That afternoon, Ariana held a closed-door press briefing at an upscale event hall in downtown Chicago. The atmosphere hummed with tension as selected journalists and reporters shuffled into the room, cameras at the ready. They knew Ariana Carter was not someone who casually addressed the media. Whatever she was about to say, it would be significant. Wearing a composed expression, Ariana took the podium. She briefly acknowledged the crowd before diving into her statement. "In recent days, there have been disturbing allegations made by Miss Veronica James against my sister, Amelia Carter, and my brother-in-law, Christopher Carter. I want to be absolutely clear. These allegations are nothing more than baseless fabrications intended to harm a pregnant woman and our family during a vulnerable time." She paused, letting the flash of cameras pop in the silence. "My sister was the victim of a physical assault perpetrated by Miss James in the Carter family home. We have pursued legal actions accordingly. Miss James is attempting to deflect from her wrongdoing by making false claims about Amelia's character. Let it be known that we will not be intimidated, nor will we allow these lies to stand unchallenged. We have every intention of pursuing all necessary legal remedies to protect Amelia and our family's reputation." A handful of reporters shouted questions as soon as Ariana finished her statement. "Miss Carter, do you deny that Christopher Carter was having an affair with Veronica James?" one asked. Ariana held up her hand. "The details of Christopher's relationship will be handled privately. My focus is on Amelia's well-being and ensuring Miss James faces the legal consequences for her assault. Thank you for your time." She stepped away from the podium, ignoring the avalanche of follow-up queries. Carmen escorted her out, where they slipped into a waiting SUV, heading straight back to the hospital to be with Amelia. Ariana felt a measure of relief. She had publicly defended her sister and set the record straight about Veronica's lies. Yet, deep down, she knew this was just the opening salvo in a larger war. The press conference sparked a new wave of media speculation. While some outlets were sympathetic to Amelia, others salivated over the sensational angle of the affair, devoting hour-long talk show segments to dissecting the love triangle. It was a feeding frenzy that threatened to overshadow any attempt to remain dignified. True to form, Veronica James did not remain silent. She took to social media, posting cryptic messages about Christopher's alleged confessions and teasing the release of damning evidence if Ariana continued to smear her name. The public, eagerly awaiting any scandalous twist, lapped it up. In private, Christopher was a wreck. He spent nights in the guest wing of the Carter mansion, haunted by the shame of his betrayal. He tried repeatedly to apologize to Amelia in the hospital, bringing flowers and baby gifts, but the emotional chasm between them felt insurmountable. Amelia accepted his visits only because Dr. Cynthia Wilson advised that hostility would raise her stress levels. She remained heartbreakingly distant, speaking to Christopher with the kind of politeness reserved for a stranger. Ariana, however, kept busy. She was determined to expose Veronica for the manipulative predator she was. Through her vast network, Ariana discovered that Veronica had a history of latching onto wealthy men, extracting money, and then destroying their reputations when they tried to break free. Veronica had grown adept at using tabloids, paparazzi, and online leaks to bolster her claims and keep her name in the spotlight. Each new morsel of scandal gave her leverage to threaten her victims with more publicity if they dared cross her. Armed with this knowledge, Ariana dug deeper. She hired private investigators who traced Veronica's financial transactions, phone records, and previous lawsuits filed by or against her. Slowly, a pattern emerged, a chain of heartbreak and financial extortion that linked Veronica to at least 3 other affluent men, 2 of whom had faced humiliating public shaming after Veronica's allegations. In each case, the men had settled out of court for large sums of money, presumably to keep Veronica quiet. Ariana smiled grimly when the evidence was laid out before her. With proper presentation, they could discredit Veronica publicly and illustrate that her vendetta against Christopher was part of a larger scheme. This was the ammunition Ariana needed to counteract Veronica's malicious threats. But Ariana also recognized one crucial weakness: Christopher's own guilt. If Veronica truly possessed incriminating photos, Christopher might be humiliated. The baby's future could be overshadowed by a very public scandal. Ariana could handle corporate warfare and paparazzi harassment, but she refused to let her unborn niece or nephew bear the brunt of a media circus. Just when Ariana believed she had a handle on how to dismantle Veronica's smear campaign, fate dealt another card. A detective named Gregory Townsend from the Chicago Police Department arrived at the Carter mansion with surprising news. He asked to speak privately with Ariana. In Christopher's study, Townsend explained the purpose of his visit. "Miss Carter, I'm investigating some missing persons and suspicious overdoses connected to Miss Veronica James," he said. "I understand your family is currently in a legal dispute with her. We've come across evidence that suggests she's been supplying certain types of narcotics to high-profile individuals. We believe some of her associates have died under suspicious circumstances." A chill ran down Ariana's spine. "Are you suggesting that Veronica is involved in something more nefarious than blackmail?" Townsend pressed his lips together. "We don't have definitive proof yet, but we suspect she's part of a ring that provides illicit drugs to wealthy clients. Some of these clients might have overdosed, but the circumstances are unclear. We have reason to believe Miss James is more dangerous than previously thought. Ariana exhaled slowly, absorbing this new revelation. So, how can I help? We're looking for financial records, phone logs, anything that might tie Miss James to these activities. If you have investigators, they might have stumbled upon something that could be relevant to our inquiry. We're also interested in Miss James' recent threats and any communications she might have sent, particularly references to settlements or hush money. Ariana hesitated. Sharing her private investigator's findings with law enforcement was a significant step and one that could escalate the conflict. But if Veronica was truly involved in criminal activities beyond blackmail, then cooperating with the police could be a powerful way to neutralize her. "I'll have my team gather what we have," Ariana said at last, her voice resolute. "If it helps protect my family and potentially save others from whatever Veronica is planning, then I'm in." Townsend gave her a firm nod. "Thank you. This could be a turning point." Little did Ariana know how right he was. By aligning with the police investigation, she was about to push Veronica into a corner, prompting a response that would be more vicious and personal than she'd ever anticipated. Within a week of Ariana sharing her evidence with Detective Townsend, Veronica's fury unleashed like a dam bursting. One quiet evening, as Ariana returned from the hospital, Carmen met her in the mansion's foyer, eyes wide with alarm. "Ariana, there's a video," Carmen gasped, thrusting an iPad into her boss's hands. "What kind of video?" Ariana asked, but her question was answered the moment she looked at the screen. It was surveillance footage from an undisclosed location, showing Christopher, visibly intoxicated, in a compromising situation with Veronica. The timestamp indicated it was months old, around the time Veronica claimed their affair began. Ariana's stomach churned. The visuals were graphic enough to be extremely damaging, not just to Christopher, but also to Amelia's peace of mind. "No one has posted it publicly yet," Carmen said, "but an anonymous email threatened to leak it to every media outlet in the city if you don't drop the charges against Miss James." Ariana inhaled sharply, grappling with a surge of rage and frustration. This was Veronica's blackmail at its ugliest. She was desperate to escape criminal scrutiny and would drag everyone through the mud if her demands weren't met. Steadying herself, Ariana placed the iPad on a nearby table. "Forward the email to Michael Jacobs," she instructed Carmen, "and get me Christopher, now." Moments later, Christopher shuffled into the foyer. He looked at Ariana questioningly before she showed him the footage. His face went ashen. "I had no idea she recorded this," Christopher said in a hollow voice. "I never would have. God, what am I going to do if this gets out?" Ariana fixed him with a cold stare. "You should have thought of that before you destroyed my sister's trust." Christopher sank to his knees, burying his face in his hands. "I deserve this, but Amelia, she doesn't deserve any of this." Ariana's anger faltered. Despite her fury, she recognized that Christopher was grappling with genuine remorse. "Stand up," she said. "We don't have time for self-pity. We need to figure out a plan. If we give in to Veronica, she'll keep extorting us. We need to hold our ground." Christopher rose shakily, tears brimming. "I'll do whatever you say." Ariana studied him, then took a careful breath. "The police suspect Veronica is involved in drug trafficking, possibly linked to deaths. She's more than a mistress on a power trip. She's a criminal who'll do anything to save her own skin. This is bigger than just saving face for you. If she's cornered, she might do worse." Christopher swallowed hard. "What do we do now?" Ariana's gaze hardened. "We expose her first." Determined to end the madness, Ariana devised a strategy. She invited Detective Townsend to the mansion for a private meeting with Christopher and Michael Jacobs. The plan was to lure Veronica into a controlled setting under the guise of negotiating a payoff to drop charges and hush the scandal. The second Veronica incriminated herself, the police would have grounds for immediate arrest. Christopher was visibly nervous, fearful that any slip-up might make the situation worse. But Ariana insisted. "This is our chance," she told him. "If Veronica records this meeting, it won't matter. We'll be wiretapping her right back, with the police's full support. Once we have proof she's blackmailing you and distributing illegal substances, Townsend can take her down." That evening, Christopher called Veronica. He spun a story of desperation, claiming that Ariana was forcing his hand, but he would be willing to secretly pay Veronica off to protect Amelia and the baby. As expected, Veronica took the bait. She demanded a face-to-face meeting at a secluded Airbnb on the city's outskirts, specifying that Christopher should come alone. However, Ariana and Townsend had every intention of being close by, armed with recording devices and a small security team. The Airbnb would be rigged with hidden cameras. Everything would be documented and ready for law enforcement to intervene. On the appointed night, Christopher arrived first. The cabin-like Airbnb sat at the end of a winding road, surrounded by tall pines. Christopher's heart pounded as he waited inside, fiddling anxiously with the hidden microphone taped beneath his shirt collar. He thought about Amelia, about the baby, about how his life had spiraled out of control. "Let this work," he prayed silently. "Let this be over." The door swung open, and Veronica strutted in, eyes cold and calculating. She closed the door behind her, scanning the small living room suspiciously. "Are you alone?" she demanded. Christopher forced a shaky grin. "Yes. Ariana still thinks I'm meeting with my lawyers. I had to sneak out to do this." Veronica tossed her purse onto the couch, crossing her arms. "So? How much are we talking about?" Christopher cleared his throat. "I can wire you $2 million tonight. But you have to destroy every piece of evidence you have against me. No more interviews, no more videos." Veronica arched an eyebrow, a dangerous gleam in her eye. $2 million? Do I look that cheap to you? The footage I have is worth way more than that. And let's not forget the potential drug charges. You and your precious Ariana can't pin anything on me if we settle. So I want $5 million minimum. Christopher swallowed, his hands trembling. "Fine," he managed to say, trying to keep his voice steady. "But you have to hand over everything you've got. Every recording, every photo, every document." Veronica's lips curled into a smug smile. She pulled out a small USB stick from her purse, dangling it like a prize. "This has everything," she taunted. "No copies, no backups. Just this. Give me the money, and it's yours. Then I'm out of your life for good." Christopher glanced toward the fireplace, where one hidden camera was placed. He hoped the device was capturing every word. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," Veronica replied with a dark laugh. "But do you really have a choice?" His jaw clenched. "All right, let's do it." In that moment, a sudden bang shattered the tense silence. The door burst open, revealing Detective Townsend and two officers, guns drawn. "Police, don't move!" Townsend shouted. Veronica whirled around, eyes wild with panic. She saw Christopher stepping back, his phone out, and realized she had walked straight into a trap. "You bastard!" she screamed, flinging the USB stick at him in a blind rage. It hit his shoulder and clattered to the floor. Townsend and the officers lunged, pinning Veronica's arms behind her back. She shrieked curses, twisting and kicking as they forced her to the ground. "You can't do this. You have no proof." Townsend smirked grimly. "We have you on tape demanding $5 million in exchange for destroying incriminating evidence. That's extortion. Plus, you assaulted Miss S. Carter, which is already in the system, and we have ample evidence suggesting your involvement in drug trafficking. You've got nowhere to run, Miss James." Veronica's eyes glistened with hatred. She spat at Christopher, but the officers kept her restrained. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure your life is ruined." Christopher ignored the venom, stepping backward, tears brimming. Ariana, who had been monitoring the scene from just outside, entered. Her gaze met Veronica's with cold triumph. "This is for Amelia," Ariana thought silently. In a flurry of curses and threats, Veronica was hauled away. Townsend scooped up the USB stick, handing it to Ariana in a sealed evidence bag. "We'll analyze it, but based on everything we already have, Miss James is facing substantial prison time." Christopher sank onto the couch, hands shaking. Ariana placed a hand on his shoulder, the tension of the night overwhelming them both. "It's over," she whispered, almost unable to believe it herself. But Christopher knew better than to assume everything was resolved. He had still betrayed Amelia, and no number of arrests or legal victories would erase that fact. The real fight for Amelia's trust was only just beginning. News of Veronica James's arrest exploded across the media. While the details of the undercover operation were kept under wraps, headlines blared variations of Veronica James taken into custody, shocking new twist in Carter scandal. And blackmail and illicit activities, mistress exposed. For a brief moment, public sentiment swayed in favor of Amelia. The narrative turned from jilted wife, overshadowed by flamboyant mistress, to victimized mother, to be targeted by a dangerous con artist. Ariana's name surfaced, too praised for her swift action and unwavering resolve. All the while, Amelia remained in the hospital, her condition improving, but her heart still shattered. When she finally felt stable enough to leave, Ariana arranged for a private car to take her to a serene retreat in Lake Forest, far from the prying eyes of reporters. A lush estate with sweeping lawns and a lakeside view awaited her, a temporary haven where she could convalesce in peace. Ariana visited daily, ensuring Amelia had the best medical care, nutrition, and even therapy sessions with a renowned counselor, Dr. Sarah Thompson. "You have to heal emotionally just as much as physically," Ariana told her gently. Amelia nodded, stroking her belly. "The baby's okay, thank God, but I feel numb." Christopher's betrayal. "It's like I'm caught between heartbreak and relief that Veronica's gone." Ariana sat beside her on a plush sofa, overlooking the water. "You can take all the time you need to sort through your feelings," she said. "No one is rushing you." Just then, Christopher arrived. He had requested to see Amelia, and she had reluctantly agreed. He walked in hesitantly, a single white rose in hand. "Amelia," he said, voice thick with emotion, "you look better." Amelia regarded him coolly. "I'm physically better, yes." He extended the rose, placing it on a side table when she made no move to take it. "I'm glad Veronica is behind bars. I'm sorry I put you through all of this. You didn't deserve any of it." Amelia inhaled deeply, trying to keep her composure. "I can't pretend everything's okay. You broke my trust in the worst possible way." Christopher bowed his head. "I know. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you, if you'll let me. But if you can't forgive me, I understand." Tears glinted in Amelia's eyes, but she fought them back. "I don't know what I want yet. You promised to be faithful, to protect me, and you failed." Her voice shook slightly. "I need time, Christopher. Time to think about our marriage, our child, and whether we can have a future together." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I'll give you whatever space you need." Ariana, watching from the corner of the room, felt a tug of empathy. Christopher was remorseful, but that wouldn't magically mend Amelia's shattered heart. Healing would require patience, commitment, and honesty, things Christopher had to prove he was capable of giving. Days turned into weeks, and life began to settle into a new normal. The scandal, while not forgotten, waned in the public eye, replaced by fresh news cycles. Veronica James remained in custody, facing multiple charges that her high-priced attorneys struggled to dismiss. Ariana spent part of each day managing her business empire remotely. Mergers, acquisitions, and philanthropic initiatives continued, but she delegated more responsibilities to her executive team, prioritizing Amelia's recovery. Amelia, for her part, embraced therapy with Dr. Thompson. She also began planning for the baby, picking out nursery themes and browsing baby clothes online. The simple act of imagining the child's future helped her channel her energy into something hopeful. During this period, Christopher wrote daily letters to Amelia. He didn't text or call often, respecting her need for space, but every evening a handwritten note arrived at the Lake Forest estate. He confessed his regrets, his love, and his desire to be a better man. Sometimes Amelia read them, sometimes she didn't. Yet the consistent sincerity in his words slowly chipped away at the wall she'd built around her heart. One late afternoon, Amelia sat on a wicker chair by the lake. The sky was streaked with oranges and pinks, the water shimmering in the dying light. She held Christopher's latest letter unopened. Ariana quietly approached, sitting on the chair next to her. "Another one?" Ariana asked softly, nodding to the envelope. Amelia nodded. "He doesn't give up." Ariana hesitated. "You'll have to decide eventually whether you want a life with him or not." Amelia gazed out at the water, her thoughts distant. "He hurt me, Ariana, but he also saved me in the end." He stood up to Veronica, helped put her behind bars. "And there was a time before all this when we were genuinely happy. I don't know if that can ever come back, but I do care about him." Ariana's expression softened. "You don't owe anyone forgiveness. But if it's what you truly want, then it's your choice. I'll support you no matter what." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. She reached over and squeezed Ariana's hand. "I wouldn't have survived this without you. Thank you for defending me, for believing in me, for everything." They sat there in silence, the soft splash of water against the shore lulling them into a calm. In that peaceful setting, Amelia found the courage to open Christopher's letter. She read his heartfelt words, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in a long while, she felt the stirrings of hope. A few days later, Amelia asked Christopher to visit her at the Lake Forest estate. He arrived, unsure of what to expect. To his surprise, Amelia greeted him outside, her hand resting on her growing belly, the late afternoon sun framing her in a warm glow. "I read your letters," she said, voice trembling. "All of them." Christopher nodded, his hands clasped in front of him, as though he were afraid to move. "I meant every word. I'm so sorry I messed things up." Amelia studied his face, the lines of remorse, the desperation etched into every angle. She remembered the laughter they once shared, the gentle comfort of his arms, the whispered promises of a life together. "Is that life completely gone?" she asked herself. "Or could they rebuild?" She took a breath, summoning the courage to speak. "I'm not sure I'll ever forget what happened. But I want this baby to have a father. I'm willing to try counseling, see if we can find a way forward. Slowly, on my terms." Christopher's eyes shone with tears. "I'll do whatever it takes." They didn't embrace right away. Instead, Amelia led him along a paved path by the lake. They walked in tentative silence, the wind rustling through the trees. It was symbolic, a slow step toward rebuilding trust, acknowledging the pain but daring to hope for healing. In the weeks that followed, Amelia and Christopher attended couples therapy, working through the layers of hurt and betrayal. It was a difficult process, emotional and raw, but it also illuminated the cracks that had formed in their relationship long before Veronica entered the picture. Amelia learned how to voice her fears and needs, and Christopher confronted his insecurities that led him to stray. Throughout it all, Ariana remained a steadfast pillar of support. She balanced her philanthropic events and corporate responsibilities with daily check-ins, She even invited Amelia and Christopher to family dinners, forging opportunities for them to reconnect under her watchful eye. No one pushed for rushed reconciliation. It was a gradual, fragile mending of hearts. By the end of Amelia's 7th month of pregnancy, her health had significantly improved. The baby was thriving, and the doctors assured her that her stress levels were manageable. Though the memory of Veronica's slap still lingered a bruise on her soul rather than her skin, Amelia had reclaimed her sense of security. The Carter mansion, once the site of heartbreak, was renovated to symbolize a fresh start. Ariana oversaw the project, ensuring that old memories were literally painted over and replaced with a more hopeful aesthetic. The criminal case against Veronica was ongoing, but the evidence was overwhelming. Facing near certain conviction, she tried to negotiate a plea deal. Neither Ariana nor Amelia attended those hearings. They had chosen to move forward, focusing on the new life that would soon join their family. One crisp morning in December, Amelia went into labor. Christopher held her hand through every contraction, whispering words of encouragement and wiping sweat from her brow. Ariana waited anxiously in the hospital corridor, along with a handful of close friends. After hours of intense effort, Dr. Cynthia Wilson emerged with a triumphant smile. "Congratulations, you have a healthy baby girl." Tears of relief and joy flooded Ariana's eyes. She rushed into the delivery room, where Amelia cradled a tiny bundle in her arms. Christopher by her side. The baby's soft cries echoed, filling them with awe. Ariana approached, gently touching the newborn's downy head. "She's perfect," Ariana whispered. Amelia smiled through tears, her eyes flicking to Christopher, then to Ariana. "We're naming her Alexandra Grace Carter," she said. "Ariana, I want her middle name Grace to remind us of the grace we've found in forgiveness and resilience." Christopher, gazing at his child, nodded in gratitude. "And we want you to be her godmother," he said, his voice cracking. "We wouldn't have made it through this without you." Emotion welled in Ariana's chest. She placed a tender kiss on Alexandra's forehead. "I'd be honored," she whispered. The moment felt like a culmination of all their suffering, courage, and love poured into one fragile new life. In the weeks that followed, Amelia and Christopher marveled at their daughter's every coup and stretch. They chose to attend regular therapy sessions, building a stronger foundation for their family. While the scars of betrayal might never fully vanish, they were learning to navigate life's storms with humility and honesty. Ariana, too, found a renewed perspective. She poured herself into philanthropic work aimed at supporting battered women and pregnant mothers who had suffered domestic strife. She channeled her resources into creating safe havens and offering legal aid, determined that no woman should have to endure what Amelia had. And so, in a grand but quiet way, the Carter family began its next chapter. Gone were the illusions of perfection, replaced by hard-earned truths about loyalty, love, and the fierce bonds of sisterhood. In their opulent world, the simplest blessing, a healthy baby, became the grandest treasure of all. Through tears, trials, and an unbreakable sisterly bond, Amelia and Ariana reminded everyone that no matter how dark the storm, a new dawn would always break, carrying hope on its golden rays. In the end, this riveting tale isn't just about betrayal or scandal. It's a powerful reminder that resilience can rise from life's darkest moments. Amelia found her inner strength to confront heartbreak and protect her unborn child, refusing to be overshadowed by a ruthless mistress's schemes. Ariana, the billionaire's sister, proved that unwavering loyalty and calculated action could topple even the most cunning adversary. Together, they took back control of their lives, exposing Veronica's crimes and forging a path toward healing. Now that you've witnessed every twist and turn, from that shocking slap in the mansion's foyer to the triumphant delivery of Amelia's baby girl, don't let this story end here.